Now, as I said in a previous lecture for this chapter, glycolysis is independent of the availability of oxygen. Okay? Glycolysis is going to happen in all living cells. Okay? Us aerobes as well as the, anaerobes are all going to use glycolysis in some form or fashion because glycolysis doesn't require oxygen to occur. What does require oxygen to occur is oxidative phosphorylation. Why that's important, because oxygen being the final electron acceptor, no oxygen, oxidative phosphorylation shuts down. If oxidative phosphorylation shuts down, NADH, FADH2 levels build up. They continue to build up. The cell is going to run out of NAD. Cell runs out of NAD, well, glycolysis can't complete. Glycolysis shuts down. So, what mechanisms have living cells evolved to overcome this? Well, we're going to see there's two ways that cells have evolved to overcome this. They both fall under the umbrella of fermentation. First is going to be lactic acid fermentation. Second is going to be alcohol fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation, as you see to the far left there, glucose gets broken down into two pyruvates. NAD gets reduced to NADH. And all the cell's levels of NAD get used up. Cell stops, cell dies. Lactic acid fermentation is going to take those pyruvates and oxidize that NADH, strip off the hydrogens, releasing new NADs. Pyruvate, through a series of steps, becomes lactate, lactic acid. The NADs can then be used by glucose to go through another round of glycolysis. So it's very small steps. It's nothing big, it's nothing major. It allows the cell to limp along. We see lots of prokaryotes do this. The lactic acid buildup, you'll see from fermenting microbes in things like yogurt, cheeses. We mammals also do this. We humans specifically do this form of fermentation. What we see happens in us humans, say for whatever reason you decide you want to go out jogging. You're running a little faster than normal, and the major muscles in your legs start to cramp. What we find happens, you're running faster than normal, you're not able to breathe enough oxygen in, your blood oxygen levels start to drop. Blood oxygen levels drop a bit. The oxygen levels in the tissues drop a lot. So those big muscle groups in your legs that are working harder than usual suddenly become in an anaerobic state. No oxygen means no oxidative phosphorylation. No oxidative phosphorylation means glycolysis is going to shut down. Except pyruvate lactate dehydrogenase kicks in, takes the pyruvate, turns it into lactic acid, freeing up some NADs. Turns out we have nerve receptors in our muscles and stuff that recognize the presence of lactic acid. As the lactic acid builds and builds and builds, sends a signal to our brain, muscle ache, cramp. What happens when you get a cramp? You slow down, you stop. You breathe heavy as you're waiting for the cramp to go away, and you're reoxygenating your blood. Reoxygenating your blood, glycolysis kicks in again because Oxidative phosphorylation now has its final electron acceptor again. All the lactate gets turned back into pyruvate. Pyruvate then goes to the mitochondria for the citric acid cycle. Alcohol fermentation. I know many a person wishes we humans did this one, but we don't do this one. This one's going to be yeast and some bacteria only. Roughly the same thing again. You're going to see that lack of oxygen or low oxygen levels is going to shut down the mitochondrial reactions, which means NAD levels drop as NADH increases. So with alcohol fermentation, you're going to see the series of reactions right here. Pyruvate gets changed back into acetylaldehyde. Acetylaldehyde and NADH becomes ethanol and NAD. Each of these steps has a different enzyme responsible. Notice that pyruvate to CO2. That pyruvate to CO2 and acetylaldehyde, that CO2 is the bubbles. The bubbles you see in beer, in champagne, the bubbles that get trapped in your bread as it's rising. Unlike the pyruvate to lactate, which is reversible, pyruvate to acetaldehyde, acetaldehyde to ethanol is not reversible. Okay, because you're releasing one of the three carbons as gas. Acetaldehyde and ethanol are both two-carbon chains. Either way, notice the NADH to the NAD in the second set of equations. The second equation. NAD is released, glycolysis can limp along once more. Keep the cell going.